Halo Reach's ending sequence Lone Wolf is brutal and bleak and brilliant. It may not tell a happy tale, but thematically it works beautifully, and the decision for Bungie to hand over control to players during Noble Six's last stand is frankly genius. And because of that, I think it deserves to be talked about in a bit more detail. But before we take a look at the mission itself, here's what happened during Halo Reach leading into Lone Wolf. Player character Noble Six joins a squad consisting of 5 other Spartans, collectively known as Noble Team, to investigate a communications disturbance near some farmland on the planet of Reach. After discovering that the alien alliance known as the Covenant has begun to attack the planet, Noble Team then heads to the secretive sword base to protect the facility, eventually meeting Dr. Catherine Halsey in the process. Halsey reveals that the Covenant seemingly attacked the base to retrieve valuable data housed there, but it quickly becomes clear that the Covenant's plans for Reach go far beyond simply assaulting Sword Base, as Noble Six and June discover a huge invasion force gathering on the planet. While some hope of fending off the Covenant still remains, the UNSC launches a counterattack on their enemy, and at first it seems to be a huge success. That is until a super carrier known as the Night of Solace appears out of nowhere, effortlessly destroying the UNSC Grafton in the process. Noble Six and George then team up to try and bring down the enormous ship, and while their mission also initially proves successful, it does cost George his life in the process. Unfortunately, however, there's little time to celebrate this victory as an enormous Covenant fleet appears in space above Reach, at which point their assault on the planet really begins to kick into gear. Noble Six, now back on solid ground, heads to the city of New Alexandria, battling through wave after wave of Covenant while trying to rescue as many civilians as he can. He then links back up with Noble Team and sets about destroying a set of Covenant communications jammers in the ruined city, but the mission ends in devastating fashion as out of nowhere teammate Cat is killed by a Covenant sniper. Noble Team then return to Sword Base once again, this time with the intention of destroying it completely, and Dr. Halsey also requests that they head to a cavern housing a Forerunner ship and hold off the Covenant long enough that she can decrypt the data housed there, information she asked the team to transport off-world, along with the AI known as Cortana. While June escorts Dr. Halsey to safety, Noble Six, Carter and Emil head to a dockyard where the ship the Pillar of Autumn is located to hand them both off to its captain Jacob Keyes. Carter gives his life to clear a path for Noble Six and Emil, and the pair then clear a path themselves so they can rendezvous with Keyes, before Emil is killed and Noble Six decides to stay behind to hold off the Covenant. The Pillar of Autumn escapes in the nick of time, but Noble Six is left on the doomed Reach, which is where Lone Wolf begins. The mission kicks off with Noble Six surveying the devastation ahead of him. After which you're given only one objective: survive. The choice of wording for this objective is excellent, as it doesn't state for definite that this is Noble Six's last stand. Reach's story did begin with a shot of his helmet lying amidst the wasteland, but you never saw his body, and now you find yourself in that very same wasteland again, not knowing exactly how events are going to play out. Of course, the bleak but amazing music, the barren environment, and Reach's tone as a whole are likely enough that you'll expect things aren't going to end well, but using the word survive does make things a little less implicit than an objective reading make your last stand or similar would have done. That being said, the only waypoint for Lone Wolf is also named Omega, the Greek letter in the alphabet which denotes the end of something, so if you saw that and have something of an understanding of the Greek alphabet, you might have also had an inkling as to what was about to happen. The environment itself is one I think works fantastically well. I've always said that the planet of Reach is as much a character as the members of Noble Team themselves, and this is especially evident here. In the game's first mission, Winter Contingency, you start off flying over lush green fields, and as the game progresses, Reach begins to mirror more and more the bleak tone of the story. The skies become darker due to the smoke and dust kicked up by the Covenant's relentless glassing of the planet. Orange, the colour of fire, becomes more dominant, and it's rare you see a building which hasn't been damaged in some way. As you make your last stand, Reach bears the scars of battle just as much as Noble Six himself does. The sun barely manages to shine through the huge plumes of smoke, the buildings around you barely remain standing, and the reduced visibility afforded by the smoke at ground level makes Lone Wolf feel like an intensely personal affair. The entirety of Reach may have been devastated by the Covenant, but the difficulty focusing on anything beyond what's immediately in front of you lends events a far more visceral feel than any other moment in the game. There's also some environmental storytelling, which works really well alongside one of the core ideas behind Reach in the form of the dead Spartans which litter the area. The game presents a huge contrast between Master Chief, the unstoppable Spartan you play as in most Halo titles, and the reality for many Spartans who aren't Master Chief. When playing as Master Chief, you always knew you'd eventually manage to come out on top in one way or another, but the dead Spartans present in Lone Wolf demonstrate the harsh reality for so many of them who aren't Master Chief. That is, that while they may be the best soldiers humanity has to offer, that doesn't mean they're invulnerable, something you experience throughout the game and also experience firsthand as Noble Six himself is eventually taken down. You're still able to feel nigh on unstoppable for a good portion of the mission as you take down squad after squad of Covenant, but unlike your time spent with Master Chief, there will be no happy ending regardless of your heroics. Lone Wolf's gameplay is a fairly standard affair in that none of the core mechanics change too much, but because this is combined with the objective of simply lasting as long as possible, it does make the mission feel like something entirely unique. You're free to move about the area as you see fit, and how long the mission lasts is entirely up to you. The amount of Covenant you have to deal with increases over time, and the weapons they use become more powerful, and this makes everything feel incredibly tense and bleak. Every time you take down a squad of Covenant, they're replaced by an even more relentless enemy presence, and gradually as you continue to fight to the death, you realise that there is truly no hope of survival. Your helmet begins to crack, a really nice addition, there's less places to hide, and you begin to run out of weapons, until eventually you take enough damage that the mission's closing cutscene kicks in. Noble Six's death is a very appropriate one, and it does have some nuance to it too. At the beginning of Reach, Carter says this:
"Just one thing, I've seen your file, even the parts the Oni censors didn't want me to. I'm glad to have your skill set. But we're a team. That Lone Wolf stuff stays behind. Clear?" "Got it, sir."
And now at the end of the game, Noble Six finds himself the Lone Wolf once again. Except he's not really the Lone Wolf in the end. Prior to the start of the mission, Noble Six actually volunteers to stay behind to provide support so that Keyes can safely return to the Pillar of Autumn.
"Lieutenant, get aboard! We gotta get the hell out of here!"
"Negative. I have the gun. Good luck, sir."
Good luck to you, Spartan.
And so while in the most literal sense, Noble Six is a lone wolf during this mission, in narrative terms, it's quite the opposite. He may well end up dying alone, but he gave his life as part of a team effort. He sacrifices himself for the greater good. You watch Noble Six make his heroic final stand through the lens of his cracked helmet before the scene eventually fades to black. It is most certainly a bleak ending, but it's one which is softened by Dr. Halsey as she delivers her closing speech, a speech which acknowledges how important a role Noble Team played in the Human Covenant War.
"It didn't take long for Reach to fall. Our enemy was ruthless, efficient, but they weren't nearly fast enough. For you had already passed the torch. And because of you, we found Halo, unlocked its secrets, shattered our enemy's resolve. Our victory, your victory, was so close. I wish you could have lived to see it. But you belong to Reach. Your body, your armor, all burned and turned to glass. Everything. Except your courage. That you gave to us. And with it, we can rebuild."
And with that, the curtain closes on Lone Wolf, on the story of Noble Six and Noble Team, and on the story of Reach as a whole, and what a conclusion it is. The mission's bleak tone, the environment it takes place in, and even the name of your final objective do so much to lend a sense of futility and desperation to proceedings. It may not be the longest level in the game, nor is it packed with variety, but Bungie sets out to evoke a very specific set of emotions in players, and they do so expertly. The ending of Reach may leave you feeling a little low, as Noble Six makes his last stand and is ultimately killed, but at the same time, I think there's few who could argue that the game itself absolutely ends on a high note. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch the video, boys, girls and Spartans. If you enjoyed it, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your thoughts, and perhaps even supporting the channel via Patreon, and hopefully I'll see you all again soon.